Okay, we are live. Woohoo! What was that noise? I even have game sound on? I don't even know. Barely. Wait, is this even pick? No, it's picking up sound. Okay. Okay. Did I just spell potpourri right? I don't even know. Why is Stream Elements doing that now? It's so weird. I'm just gonna yell at Stream Elements for being weird. It's fine, it's what I do anyways. That's better, right? Okay. It's super quiet in here today. We'll be getting started shortly. Oh, that's why it's so quiet. Okay. We'll be getting started shortly. We're just running a little late on time, and things pop up, and we're getting there. Why is my bot not connecting? Okay. Oh. Sorry, I'm having issues. I need to find Twitch. Ugh. Oh my god. Sorry. We'll be getting started short. I'm having some technical issues with my bot, which is slightly frustrating. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go here. There we go. Okay. Everything's fine. Everything's working. How's everyone doing tonight? Just waiting for Sai to get back and we'll get started. Let's see here. What's up? Void traces. Ew. Those sorties aren't any fun. Okay. Oh boy. So, today, before we get started, we can talk a little bit. Today it's gonna be kind of a potpourri day. Cause we're trying to experiment and figure out different formats and ways of handling topics and stuff like that. So, today we're gonna be doing just a bunch of like smaller conversation points. They're kind of all over the place, but they're just kind of topics that we found throughout the week that we'd sit down and we'd actually just end up talking about them off the podcast. So we're going to try doing that tonight, which I'm a little excited to try out and see how it goes. So our topics for the night are... Let me find them. Oh no, where'd they go? They were literally right here. Sorry, give me a second. I have like 1,000 things popping up on me. Okay. What do I do with my topics? Oh, here they are. So we're going to talk about development promises versus market expectations for game releases, which is kind of a relevant subject as of late. I think Fallout 76 is a very relevant game to that subject matter. We're also going to be talking about... I don't want to go too much into it until we're all here. We're also going to talk about children-oriented MMOs, which it's something that kind of popped up on my radar as I was going through articles. So that's like talking about like Free Realms, Toontown, and one I never even heard of before called Infinity Castle, which is according to the article that I was reading, arguably one of the first 2D children-oriented MMOs. And then we were kind of riffing about the history of Easter eggs in games for a little bit, so I thought we'd toss that one in here for this week. And if we get to them, we also have credits in video games and the politics that go behind them. And then I actually was just watching a video the other day that was talking about the history of Tetris. And I thought that in regards to that, talking about the licensing and the politics of licensing was interesting with how, in particular to Tetris, it like played out, because they kept licensing it, then sub-licensing, and then sub-licensing again until it got to the point where the licensor didn't know who actually had license rights anymore, until one of those sub-licenses went back to the original licensor, and they're just like, who the heck are you? So I kind of want to talk about that because I thought that was interesting. And the last subject that we have on schedule, we might get to it, we might not. Who knows? Depends on how long we riff on the previous subjects. Is DLC and cash shops versus base game releases, and just kind of discuss where do you draw the line between what you release as a base game and what you release as a DLC afterwards. And we'll probably talk about EA in that regard, because EA actually,
and here I am.
hi. I was just going through our talking points for the day, and
Yep.
yeah, I'm sure you were listening.
I went and visited Google Plus to let them know that we were doing this thing. I used to love Google Plus, and then Google decided, no, we need to be more Facebook, and I stopped loving Google Plus, and so did a whole lot of other people, because
Wait, you
Google
went to
Plus
Google
is going
Plus? Are we
Yeah.
sponsored?
away. No.
Damn. Well, I guess we can't to the stream. We're not sponsored.
No, I used to be really active on Google Plus. It had a really good discussion community, because I found like a really good group of people that did like indie tabletop RPGs. And so, I mean, it was a really great group. But it started off being like a really great social network, but then there was the kind of the attitude that well, it's not working. We need to keep on changing it. And then Google basically announced recently that they're shutting it down. So
yeah, and that a lot of people are speculating that's what caused that 2-hour shutdown of YouTube the other week.
Oh.
Because I mean, we can riff about this for a little bit.
Yeah.
There are some inside sources that from Google that have recently, parted with Google, and they were saying that when they were doing the Google Plus rush, they were getting their coders to integrate as much of Google Plus into YouTube as physically possible.
Right. They wanted to do they wanted to hook up if you linked to a video you posted, they wanted to connect the Google Plus and YouTube comments.
Right.
And yeah, it was just kind of a mess. And like a lot of people kind of felt because I mean, well, this is kind of interesting from a community management point of view. Like, there's two different communities. There were two different communities, between Google Plus and YouTube
Being forced
and
together.
Right. Essentially, yeah. And so it was basically like a severe culture clash to try to like force these two things back together. And so yeah, it made no sense. But like like
Google's gonna do what Google wants to do. Like,
well, yeah, like I think it felt very much like Google wanted like Facebook type numbers. And so like like the whole integration thing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is just pure speculation.
Yeah.
But it felt like they were kind of trying to kind of shove some of the YouTube people into Google Plus and say, "Oh, look how popular Google Plus is! Because look at all these comments they're basically made through through YouTube."
Right, right.
And kind of ignoring the fact that no, these are actually two separate communities. You can't just shove them together. They would kind of develop independently.
Sure, we can. Watch us.
Right. Well, yeah.
Like that, I think like Google is the best example of like a rebellious child you can have, where you say, Google, you can't do that, and Google's just like, watch me.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like kind of unfortunate too, because like talking about the kind of their carelessness of the communities. Google Reader was a very popular RSS reader, and like a lot of people that were participating in the MMO blogosphere used it to kind of keep track of things.
Mm-hmm.
And Google just kind of at one point decided, no, we're not interested in supporting this anymore, so they got rid of it. And like a lot of people think that that's kind of one of the big reasons why blogging isn't so big anymore, because they get essentially killed one of the main ways of people tracking blogs.
That's interesting.
And so and so like but kind of at that point, but the and like kind of some of the conspiracy theories were that they're trying to drive people away from blog toward Google Plus, which obviously didn't happen.
Crap, I just forgot what mods I had on the shotgun. Hold on. Someone in the Twitch get a screenshot of my build there. I fucked up. Oh well. So yeah, so the speculation is that they actually tried to shut down Google Plus like that day that we lost YouTube, and then they're like, oh, we fucked up, and then like try to backtrack it.
I doubt it was probably that easy, but I think that it was definitely one of those things there. They, I could see people kind of being upset about it, and then, but yeah, like like Google tends to do that though. They tend to kind of really focus on something until they don't like it anymore, and then it's just kind of like, no, not really kind of caring that there's probably hundreds of thousands of people that like that thing, but this is not worth their time.
Right. Crap, I forgot what I had loaded on this thing before I formatted it. Oops. I'm formatting my Boar Prime just to do it.
Yeah, what do we want to do tonight? Do we want to run Hydron and Forma shit?
I mean, we can do that. Why are we talking?
I mean,
that's an easy
pick something
call.
to Forma.
What?
I need to find something to Forma. The other alternative would be to just run Fishers for drops.
I mean, I'm fine with some leveling runs.
Okay, let me figure out what I want to Forma then.
I'll finish leveling that later. I want to work on Boar Prime just because I want to make a functionable weapon. Because I like Boar Prime.
Yeah, it's actually kind of a nice auto shotgun. I kind of like it.
Okay. So I guess we oh yeah, Dejar says G Plus had better format for reasonable discussion as opposed to indiscriminate flaming, except that Google had some terrible UI designers.
Well, I mean, you can get used to UI, but like that was one of the things that just killed it for me is they kept on tweaking the UI over and over again, and from my perspective, it feels like they kind of worked to make it much more mobile friendly. But like I was reading Google Plus on a browser, like I'd read Google Plus on my phone occasionally, but it's like I didn't understand the motivation of trying to make the browser look more mobile like when it's like, well, I'm not on a mobile device. But eventually, it just became, frankly, it just became more of a chore to read than, because of the constant UI changes. Then it was useful, and so I just kind of started ignoring it.
See, I never used
And
Google Plus personally. I didn't have anyone to use it. Like, I just didn't have any use for it. All the communities I was a part of already had other platforms.
right.
But Dejaro says that he had some friends with visual disabilities who gave up Google Plus because of the UI changes.
Yeah. It felt really much. It felt like they really had no clue what they were doing with the UI change. Like you said, the only thing I can kind of the only feeling I really get out of it was that they wanted to, essentially they wanted to make it more mobile friendly. I guess in case people visited the site on their mobile browser instead of downloading the app.
I have no idea. Like, I have like one friend on Google Plus, and that was like not even because we meant to add each other. It's just like a necessary thing to do something or another. I don't remember. I like to keep in touch, but we never keep in touch. So.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. As one does.
Yeah. As it happens. What do I want to form a?
I don't know. Just pick something. Jeez. Okay, so once you pick that, then we'll start on the first subject, which is development promises and market expectations. Which I think we've talked like a lot of the things on this list we've talked about a little bit in the past. Like we've talked a little bit about like No Man's Sky and all that.
Right.
But we're trying to find things to talk about. And I literally just write down things that we're riffing on throughout the week.
Yeah. Just we kind of stop and just talk about stuff, and it's like, oh hey, we should totally talk about that on the when other people are listening and can contribute.
Exactly, and that's how the stream works. You guys engage, we talk about it. You guys tell us we're idiots. I mean, no, Sai tells me I'm an idiot. Then I take it out on the stream, and then
I mean, as long as we kind of have that, simpatico going.
Right.
As long as you understand your place.
Exactly. Are you ready yet?
Give me a second.
But we do have a new subject to talk about, which thanks to my Warframe clan for subject ideas. I got some secondhand revealing on the salt towards Fallout 76, which I haven't really paid much attention to. I didn't realize how upset people were about that game.
There's salt on the internet? Why did nobody tell me this?
Wait, what did Nintendo call it? The Blue Ocean Movement? That's why, because there's so much salt.
Okay, now I'm ready to go.
Are you sure?
Oh, shit, no, cancel.
Are you serious? I will kill you. Okay, so where do we want to start with development promises versus expectations?
I think it's really interesting because obviously I follow a lot of developers and whatnot, and there's been this like real trend toward calling gamers entitled. And
Our position has been compromised.
it's
Defend the
I'm really kind of like hesitant about that because I mean they're still customers. I'm definitely not a customer's always right type of person. Definitely not. But I think that there's certain expectations for through a lot of things, like through history of the industry or through what people think the developers say and what developers actually say.
Right, what they hear versus what is said.
Right. What they hear versus what the developers actually say. It can be two completely different things. And I think that it's one of those things like you kind of want to be careful about like writing off players as entitled when when it tends to be feedback because like like a lot of times people get very talking about feedback a little bit when I ran Road 59, I had a lot of very enthusiastic fans, we'll say.
Passionate, as Bethesda calls, or Blizzard calls them. They're passionate.
Right. Exactly. And like so with the whole Diablo Immortal thing, like Blizzard kind of said, oh, we have very passionate fans, and they and I think that's not a terrible attitude to take. That like because the people that really don't like your stuff, like the people who like just purely don't like Diablo Immortal, like I'm not going to say anything. I think they're not the ones going to getting online and complaining. They're the ones they're the ones that just like ignore it. Just, like, and if they're pissed off enough at Blizzard, they'll just go away.
Right. They're the ones that have no interest.
Right. The people that complain are the ones that essentially
they care enough to complain.
Right, exactly. Like they're the ones who want to that want things better. Like they see a way that things could be better, and so they kind of say like look like so like in the case like taking Diablo Immortal here. The feedback was, look, we want a proper sequel, and and developers can kind of explain away and say, oh well, they're working on the sequel and it'll be ready when it's ready and all this other stuff. But I think that I like them making a mobile game that's, let's be honest here, primarily focused on the Chinese market and making this like a headline announcement at BlizzCon. Really kind of shows that to those gamers, it feels like like they don't understand what the gamers want. It's not just I'm gonna throw a temper tantrum unless you give me Diablo 4 right now, but it's like you decided to you decided to make this the big Diablo announcement after kind of like potentially teasing about there being a major Diablo announcement at BlizzCon.
Well, that's one of the things that I find interesting too, is because leading up to BlizzCon, they were actually trying to downplay it because they saw how much hype was building up. Right. Because the players got teased a little bit, and so they overreacted with like, "Oh my God, it's gonna be Diablo 4," and then Blizzard was like, "Oh, hold on."
Right. They tried to manage expectations, but it was a little, it was basically too little, too late.
Right.
Type thing. And and being a developer, I can definitely sympathize. Like but on the flip side, like Blizzard's been really good at marketing. Like Blizzard's really good at driving up the hype. So like
that sometimes they're a little too good at it.
Responsibility. They need to hire Spider-Man as a consultant, obviously.
With so much power.
Right. I mean, because I mean, like you have people that are, well, I want they were expecting this thing. Blizzard's good at making, has basically primed their audience to be very hypeable, which is great. When they want to, get hyped up, but we've kind of seen the downside of that, where if you get people hyped up, for something, and you don't deliver, even if you never explicitly said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to be, doing this," like, there's enough kind of hints and dropped and whatnot that there's the expectations built up.
Right. And
go
ahead.
And part of me is, sympathetic to that, but then the other part of me is like, well, this is Blizzard. They don't need my sympathy. Like, they'll dry their tears with the $100 bills as they go to the bank because all the money they make off their games.
100. You're really
well, it's harder to get higher denomination bills because of.
Oh yeah, you have to go into bonds at that point.
Something drug policy, smaller denominations in order to make it harder for large cash transactions. Anyway,
Anyways.
But yeah, and so I think that so like developers calling the players entitled because they kind of expected something and then it wasn't delivered on, like rubs me a little wrong. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't entitled people out there. There aren't people that really kind of need to take a step back and
calm down.
Realize that the game developers are not your bitch that put out and do whatever you want whenever you want just because you're waving $60 at them or whatever.
Call of Duty fans. I mean, what?
Right. Well, I mean, a lot of fans, but yeah. And so, anyway, you were gonna say something. Sorry.
Well, I just had like an aside about with more hype creates more controversies as a tendency.
Right. I mean, and looking from Blizzard's point of view, like all the controversy over Diablo Immortal means that a lot more people who might actually be in the audience for Diablo Immortal are going to hear about it because everybody's posting about, oh my god, have you seen these gamers losing their shit over Diablo Immortal?
I was thinking back to Overwatch and the Buttgate controversy. I'm just like, I mean, just looking back at it, it's just like that's a really, really stupid thing to have a controversy over.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel like, sometimes I kind of have to suspect that some of these controversies are generated,
right?
Just to get attention. Because while it kind of reflects, potentially reflects poorly on Blizzard that, oh my god, they're basically sexualizing a character to sell stuff.
And then they ended up making her a lesbian in their canon lore, and it's just like, okay.
Yeah. Well, but then then people kind of complain about other representation or whatnot. But anyway, or token representation. That's a whole other topic that I think let's not get into tonight.
Another podcast, another day.
Yeah. I mean, I think representation and how game companies handle it is good, but it's good. It's a good thing to discuss and kind of deal with. But I think there's a lot of kind of knee-jerk reaction
just for the sake of doing it.
Right. There's a lot of knee-jerk reaction about But yeah. So going back to kind of expectations versus promises, like in some ways, like a lot of this kind of controversy works in the game company's favor. Like Blizzard really doesn't need our sympathy about like having to deal with their fans. Like they've built up this large group of very passionate fans that over years that will pretty much throw money down on any Blizzard game that's published.
And DLC and expansion and microtransaction, and they'll buy everything.
Right. And so, this is a little bit part and parcel with like how games have been marketed over the years, and it very effectively marketed, mind you. Because you have and so it's easy to whip people up into a frenzy, and the flip side of that too is like even though like games have different games have different audiences, game companies generally aren't in the just companies in general generally aren't in the business of telling people, look, don't buy our product if it's a mass market thing. Like,
Right.
Blizzard games are not, high-end exclusive for the wealthy only things that, I mean, that's definitely one valid marketing tactic. But I don't think you're ever going to see video games being, this is for the elites only, not for you.
Star Citizen, thank you very much.
Oh, I don't know what I want to say about that. Anyway, moving on.
That's a full podcast all on its own.
Anyway, yeah, and so basically, it's not like Blizzard's gonna go around and say like, oh hey, please don't buy Diablo Immortal if you're not interested. They want everybody to use it. I guess this is the kind of tying this back to Fallout. Like, if you look at it from a business point of view, why did Bethesda use the Fallout name for this?
It's a fair question.
Let's go.
Like I felt like if they wanted like a huge turnout for a multiplayer game, they would have used Elder Scrolls. Like I feel like Elder Scrolls has a larger following.
Yeah, well, Elder Scrolls, but they have Elder Scrolls Online that they're kind of focusing on. I think that they.
True.
But,
I forget that game exists.
Yeah, I mean, Elder Scrolls Online is one that's it's kind of on a. Elder Scrolls Online is one of those games that basically kind of it's kind of like on the wild hairy edge of. I mean, I heard for the longest time it was definitely one of those games where they were a little worried about like its survival. It kind of looked very unpopular at the beginning. So but I think like usually when a game company uses a name like that is because they want to tap into the existing fan base
and try to expand it.
Right, or at least know that we're going to sell to X% of the existing fan base. I mean that's the rule for sequels and like the movie industry is that it's pretty much guaranteed that a certain large percentage of people that watch the first movie are going to see the second movie, no matter how terrible it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that there's probably like some kind of rule of thumb for game sequels as well. And so so basically if the reason they call it Fallout 76 instead of like a random hillbillies, playing with nukes, 76, is that they wanted to tap into that the Fallout fan base. And so if you're going to tap into that fan base, you have to pay attention to the expectations that like they have, and people don't build up expectations in a vacuum. They build up expectations based on what the game company has done before, particularly in their marketing.
Right.
And so, if people wanted to have, if Fallout 76 was supposed to be, was supposed to be the next great Fallout game, like people wanted to be the next great Fallout game. Like they wanted the, Fallout 76 to be, as different from Fallout 4 as it was from Fallout 3.
Right. They weren't expecting. They didn't want it to be just a spin-off or an offshoot.
Right, they didn't want it to feel largely like a game they already own, but now it has a multiplayer, focus. So, and so, I mean, and I'm not saying like the developers shouldn't be able to go and do things like that, like make a multiplayer version, but like it feels a lot like the marketing. Because like somebody pointed out, I was talking about this in one community I'm in, and somebody pointed out that. Todd Howard, the creative director of the Fallout series of I think Bethesda as a whole, kind of pointed, basically said at like some gathering, some like E3 or something like that. Mm-hmm. Basically kind of laid down exactly what Fallout 76 is.
Right.
It was supposed to be like very similar to Fallout 4. That was going to be a focus on multiplayer, that type of thing. So people said, like players have no reason to complain about it
because he laid out exactly what the expectation should be.
But but I think that's just one element that like you have to look at what was the marketing for Fallout 76, which I don't know. Like I don't subjected myself to marketing willingly. I don't know. I'm not the hugest Fallout fan, so I'm not like going to Fallout sites and seeing what they're talking about.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat personally.
But what I suspect was that the marketing didn't say, hey, it's just like Fallout 4, both multiplayer.
Right.
I'm sure that, the marketing, because again, game companies are not in the business of telling you no, you shouldn't play this game.
Right. From what I heard from the game news feeds that I do listen to, everyone was expecting it to be like a Fallout survival game.
Right.
And so you think survival game, and what do you think? I can't even think of an example off the top of my head. I'm a bad a horror survival game, I want to say. Maybe The
Right.
Forest, or maybe something like 7 Days to Die, or one of those
Right.
big open world survival games. And what they got was an offshoot of Fallout 4. So I mean, I can see why people were confused when it's being marketed as a big survival game.
Right. Or they're led to believe it's a big survival game, or whatever, or
Right.
or it's the next Fallout game. Like a lot of times, game companies will be kind of vague in the in marketing if they want to, if they want to appeal to an audience they think might not like it, because again, they're not going to tell Fallout fans, "Oh, look, if you were looking for a completely new Fallout experience, this is not it. Don't buy it." They're hoping everybody buys it, and maybe they have to deal with some returns or whatnot. But most Fallout fans are probably going to buy it and just kind of grump about it,
and then revisit it later after it gets a new DLC or an update or something.
Right. Assuming that they're not completely pissed off, and the number of people that are basically going to stop being Fallout fans because this game didn't meet expectations are probably going to be pretty low. I mean,
they'll just go back to playing Fallout 3, Fallout 4 with mods, and go
right.
their...
waiting for proper Fallout 5 to come out. Yeah.
Right.
And so game again. They're kind of going back to our discussions from before. Games are a business. And so, and marketing is kind of the purest aspect of that business expression. They're trying to maximize the number of people buying this game.
Right.
And so to say that, the gamers are entitled nitwits that, didn't listen to the creative director's E3 presentation, so obviously they have no room to complain, I think is disingenuous, at least.
Right, and of course, when we're talking about this, we're talking about you got to talk about No Man's Sky a little bit.
I thought you were gonna go there. Yeah. I mean, yeah, and I think that again, that's another kind of aspect of another aspect of what we're talking about here, where this indie type game. I'm hesitant to call it indie because they were supported by a publisher. To what extent we can argue, but I'll at least acknowledge that it basically had that is going for that indie feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
But they kind of they captured lightning in a bottle. They were able to get this really strong, enthusiastic word of mouth excitement about the game that most developers would kill for.
I think a lot of it was because at the time there wasn't a lot of push for space exploration games. Now there's actually quite a few that are basically trying to follow on the wake of No Man's Sky's hype, being well, No Man's Sky wasn't the one that you want. Here, we got it.
Right. Well, but the industry also tends to kind of go in cycles as well. Like you look at take kind of jumping topics a little bit here. Take first person shooters. Like I forget which one did one of the World Wars as a shooter first, and then everybody's like, oh hey yeah, like totally we'll do all the wars. Here's the Vietnam War first person shooter.
Medal of
all
Honor
that
did
stuff.
that.
Right.
I know because I played all of them.
Right. But I mean, but you have like other games that kind of did the same thing. Like they kind of followed on from that. So and it's not necessarily because they look at Medal of Honor and say, oh hey, we totally need to copy that. It might just be like, oh, shooters based on war and on actual historical wars are popular. So let's try these things out and see if we can't give a fun experience based on this that kind of taps into kind of current sentiment. So
it's actually a little interesting to I know we're going a little off topic, but talking about Medal of Honor in particular, they actually had Steven Spielberg as a consultant for the game.
Oh yeah.
To make the game line up with the
Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, like if you go throughout the game, you'll actually see like scenes that are basically right out of Saving Private Ryan in that game. Or yeah, it's really because like I played Medal of Honor for years, and Medal of Honor came out first. But then I was watching Saving Private Ryan in like a U.S. history class in high school, and I'm like, this is a level out of Medal of Honor. What the hell?
Right.
And, like I looked it up later, and I'm like, oh, they did that entirely on purpose. That's actually kind of cool.
Right. But yeah, I think that you have, but going back to the original topic, I think you have when you manage to kind of tap into that hype, as a developer
thing.
you can. Yeah, it's a powerful thing. I think as a developer you kind of have to take a little responsibility for it to understand that this isn't just all upside because oh my god, look at these people just are so thrilled about the game that they're like you kind of have to realize that this hype is going to take on a life of its own, and then anything you say or don't say it could potentially be misinterpreted, and stop and this is a hard thing. I'm not going to say that game developers are stupid, obviously, because I've had to deal with this myself. But it's a very tricky thing because a lot of times as you're developing a game, plans meet reality and things change. A classic example of this from early MMOs was Ultima Online talked about having a necromancy system similar to what was in it was Ultima 7, 8. I forget which one was the.
Oh yeah, we talked about that. I thought you said it was 6, but
no, it was one of the later ones.
Okay.
So, and essentially what this was, it was like developers kind of like talking about some of the stuff they were throwing around. But then the players kind of took this as a solemn promise that this system is going to show up in the game, so get ready.
Right.
And so the developers kind of like as they kind of started working with it, they kind of realized they really couldn't do much fun with it, in given the kind of the restrictions of the of the game and the technology and whatnot. And so whereas this would have been an idea it would have just been quietly discarded. It took on a life of its own because the hardcore Ultima fans were like, yes, I want necromancy in this because it's part of the world, the lore of the world, of the setting.
Right.
And so then it became like a long-standing thing. And I guess they finally did put it in the game, and it was basically just as lackluster as the developers feared. It's like, well, this isn't very interesting.
Because they caved into that pressure to release it. Right.
Well, but the lesson here is is basically twofold. I mean, I don't think it really hurt the game that they released necromancy. In as so much as there were development resources dedicated to it, whereas the resources could have been going to a system that could have been more fun to add to the game. But I think the real lesson you learn here as a developer is like, be really careful about what you say. Like, talking about stuff that's not confirmed yet. Like, and it's hard because like every hardcore gamer kind of wants that inside scoop. They want to know what's coming on, what's going on. They want to know what's coming. And the earlier, like, getting like a really early thing. Oh, that's juicy. But like I said, a lot of times game developers kind of suddenly realize like, oh, well, this isn't working according to plan. This isn't going to work. We're going to scrub this idea, and then you kind of run right into player expectations being violated.
Right, and like going back to No Man's Sky about you were talking about responsibility.
Mm.
What was his name? Sean Murray. Like, he'd go on interviews and talk about like what he had imagined would be amazing for the game, not what the game was actually going to release. And that was a great irresponsibility on his part.
I mean, again, like, it's tricky to kind of like lay all the blame at his feet. I mean, I think that,
I'm not trying to blame him entirely, but I feel like he could have handled his press announcements or his press interviews a little more tactfully. But he got very excited about all the
right. I mean, we have passionate fans and excited developers, like
right.
Like especially when you're talking very early in a game development cycle. All these, you have all these kind of great plans and ideas and visions in your head, but then the real maturity as a developer kind of sets in when you realize that most of that's just not going to get in there. Like, you're going to have to kind of wheedle things down, and in the industry we kind of have a name for that called knifing your babies. Like, sometimes you're just gonna. I mean, because that's kind of what it feels like. You have this like really great idea that's going to make this game super fun, but you know what? It's going to take so much more resources, and it's going to be it's going to be a drag. You're going to have to delay the launch by months or whatever. You just going to have to accept that. Sorry, that's going to have to be cut.
Mm-hmm. And in the case for No Man's Sky 2, they did eventually fulfill their development promises. It just took them like a year after launch to actually start.
Right. I mean, that's kind of the downside, is that like when you're promising all this stuff, like reality has a really terrible way of kind of asserting itself and crushing your expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And so if No Man's Sky had could have had another year's development time, like then they could have launched with all the promises, probably, assuming they didn't keep on promising shit. But the flip side of that is that it's really hard to kind of know up front what's going to go and what isn't, and like I mean, because like given enough development resources and time, like you can put whatever you want in the game, but just a question of can you sit there and write the technology that maybe doesn't exist? Can you do you have enough people to can you still can you do you have the people to actually develop the content to create all the content in the game? Do you have enough time to to allow people to do all these things? So
right. And I whenever we're talking about like assets being developed and like time investments, I always go back to an interview I watched from the world
words
the World of Warcraft team when they were developing Cataclysm. I watched an interview where one of the tools developers was talking about how they wanted to have inverted movement so that people could move on the ceiling of the underground zone.
Right.
But like, so they developed the tools over the course of 6 months, and then the designers came back to them and like, oh no, we're not going to use that anymore.
Right.
And I'm just like, 6 months of resources put into a tool Like any other company that had that kind of investment just kind of dropped would be feeling that pain.
Right.
But Blizzard just like meh, shrug it off.
Right. Well, I mean, I mean, this kind of shows you that some of the difficulties of planning, especially in a larger company where left hand and maybe the left hand and the right hand aren't talking as well as they should.
And then it just makes me wonder, well, if that can happen at Blizzard on their prodigal child Warcraft, like
right,
makes you wonder like how devastating that could be on in a smaller development team if something like that were to happen, where someone put all their resources into a particular tool and then halfway through they're like, oh no, we're not going to use that anymore.
Right. You really need to kind of make sure that you establish expectations up front about what and proper planning. Oh, we have a Mitter knocked.
Oh, do we?
Yeah, he just joined.
Okay. Hi, Mitter.
Hello.
We're on the 15th. We're on the 15th round of a Hydron run, so we'll be down here in a second.
Exciting.
Oh, you're super quiet.
Yeah.
Still.
We were talking about developer promises versus player expectations.
Oh.
Yeah. Of course, we're talking a little bit about like the No Man's Sky stuff and talking about more recent like people being upset with Fallout 76.
Well.
Did you play Fallout 76?
Oh, thank God, no.
So, what's your opinion on the game then?
I know.
Well, there was no way that wasn't going to be horrible. It's just like I thought it was a pretty transparent attempt to monetize a multiplayer hack of the Fallout 4. Or at least that's what it looks like. I'm sure it took more work than that, but that doesn't mean it's any good.
Now that I was thinking about that though, what if Bethesda had tried to market it as an add-on to Fallout 4 instead of a standalone product?
You probably couldn't charge as much for it.
Yeah, I mean that's probably the thing. They're probably going to charge full price for it.
True. So, let's see here. If we're good on that subject, do you have any more thoughts? Also, they would have had it integrated the existing F4 player inventories. Dejara says.
Yeah,
Oh, it would.
well, I mean, it could have done
It'd
something.
be like starting a new game. It's just like...
Right, you could have it. You could have it. You start a new game and it's like a new save file. Not related to your old save file.
So the other thing with promises, like this isn't a new trend, is the other thing. Like this, developers over-promising on games is something that has happened for a very, very long time.
Right.
You and I were talking about that. I think we were talking about that last night. We were talking about Fable.
Yeah.
And
pretty much any Molyneux game,
Yeah,
to be honest.
Where it, well, Fable in particular, because that's one I know.
Right.
It was it was hyped up to be like this really powerful choices matters game. Everything you do in the game impacts everything else in the game. If you choose to kill this character at this point in the story, then that's gonna change the entire story. And then you get to that, none of those choices actually exist. Like,
Right.
if you kill a character in an early point of the story continues on regardless. Maybe some dialogue changes a little bit, but other than that, it really has no overbearing impact.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and you know, Molyneux tends to be, he said, is a little bit infamous for this. But I mean, to be fair, he does, try at least attempt to do, novel types of games and whatnot.
The funny thing of what I thought was is that this is a this is a bit of necromancy on a horse. That no one seemed to remember that about Chris Roberts when he came out back on the scene after, disappearing for 10 years or whatever, and said everyone should give him money. And mine and my roommate's first thought is, why? Like, we remember the things that you promised before that you couldn't deliver, that sounded an awful lot like this thing, which you're probably not going to be able to deliver.
Right.
Or will change. Because, I mean, go and read some stuff about Freelancer. Like,
right.
when, they were talking to you when it was in development, or when Digital Anvil, first made made the whole thing, and or read the list of all the games that supposedly Digital Anvil was, making, of which only 3 came out, and none of them like they were described. Well, Freelancer sort of, kind of.
Right.
Starlancer sort of, kind of, because it was mostly just a shooter anyway. But
yeah,
I think was farmed out, so most people don't even count it.
Right. I mean, and what I was talking about before you joined us was, a little bit about, marketing, like a lot of times there's, sometimes you get like the lead developer or whatnot kind of promising stuff, but you also get marketing, games are a business, and marketing is kind of the purest expression of that, where, their goal is to get as many people to buy the game as possible. In order to, because that's that's how sales work. You want as many people buying as possible, and so like in a case like a Fallout 76, marketing's job is not to say, oh, don't buy this if you're expecting a completely new Fallout. Marketing's job is just to basically say, oh, you like Fallout 4, you'll love Fallout 76. Even if it's not the completely new experience that people might want. And so but I think that there is a little bit to be said about managing expectations. But I think there's there's fault on both sides. Players kind of need to kind of understand better about what a game developer is about. And on the flip side, game developers kind of need to make sure they understand when they say something, how much weight that potentially carries.
Yeah, I'm just reading about Freelancer because I don't know anything about it.
I mean, it goes back further than Freelancer. I think the other big one, which is mostly lost to the sands of history, or sands of time, I guess, more accurately, is Strike Commander. There was a it's so far back I don't even remember what all the stuff, but I just remembered it was delayed a really long time and it came out and it was really not. It didn't do a bunch of things that it, or it wasn't a bunch of things that they said there was going to be. And if I recall correctly, it's one of the number of cases where someone else had to come onto the project to finish it, or force Roberts to finish it.
Right. Okay, yeah, and a slight tangent here is it's interesting, kind of like talking about, because that's basically the role of the publisher. The publisher's there to kind of like is often there to kind of make sure that their investment isn't getting wasted. Basically being able to hold developers' feet to the fire and say, look, you need to get this done. We can enforce the contract that we signed. Crowdfunding, I think one of the interesting things about crowdfunding is it showed how much publishers are kind of necessary for the development process, and kind of how like how much people didn't understand how important the publishers were in a way.
Right.
Because it's all well and good to say, oh, we're going to develop this game in a year and a half, then be 4 years in development and going, well, release it when it's good, because that would not fly with a publisher. The publishers wants a return on their investment, and even though you get a bunch of people kind of throwing in money to a crowdfunded project. But yeah, I think we've kind of beat this topic to death.
Yeah. So moving on. Next, I just kind of had these articles popping up talking about children-oriented MMOs. So that's the next topic.
That was interesting because there was this big drive for that for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
We had a bunch of games like that: Toontown, Free Realms, a lot of games. Like Disney had kind of like an MMO thing, kind of based on the theme parks. I forget the name of it. It was kind of a little bit of a mixed media because there's stuff that happened in the parks as well as when you logged on and moved around a virtual world. And I think that kind of the idea was
virtual Magic Kingdom.
Yep, that was it. I think that probably the idea was that they wanted to try to, especially for Disney, you kind of want to try to capture the audience early. That basically works well for them because then kids who grew up watching Disney movies become parents who let their kids watch Disney movies, etc.
It's the thing that I thought interesting is that most of the really popular children-oriented MMOs or online services have basically shut down. Like Club Penguin, Toontown.
Right.
There's a Pirates of the Caribbean online.
There was, I think, yeah. Yeah, most of these were Disney, whereas Disney is usually pretty big in the children's market.
Right, and one in particular that I saw an article for, that the article tries to hype it up as claiming it to be arguably one of the first 2D children-focused MMORPGs, called Infinity Castle.
Oh yeah,
which I'd never heard of before.
Yeah, I think so. I think the problem is twofold. Like one, kind of it's really hard to develop for children.
Right.
And we can go into a whole lot of that stuff because especially if you're Disney, you don't want with all the kind of the fear mongering that was in the early internet about oh my god pedophiles will talk to your kid. Like Disney had to be really careful about that. I think the other problem you run into was that MMOs basically were cyclical, just like pretty much everything else in the games industry. MMOs are no longer popular, and then basically the kids that might have been interested in playing especially a lot of the later games like Free Realms and whatnot, probably were interested in other things. Basically kind of went over. Because I think some of that was a little bit of that was kind of like because there's two kind of like free to play ish games. One was RuneScape, of course, that like had essentially a free to play model. Like you could play for free, but then you could also upgrade to a pretty cheap subscription, if I remember correctly.
It's like $5.
Yeah, it's like $5 a month. So like it was basically kind of like baby's first subscription MMO, where they would play for free. Their friends would get hooked in there, and then they could go beg mom and dad for $5 a month, which is a lot cheaper than the $10-15 a month. The other one that was very big. Oh shoot, what was it called? It's more of a browser game that basically had like stick figures and whatnot. Kingdom of Loathing. That was another pretty big game. I think they kind of with an audience that skewed a little younger. Mostly because it was free, and so I think especially RuneScape, like people saw the success of RuneScape, attributed it to it basically being very cheap or free to very cheap to free, and then wanted to kind of try to capture that. Because like Jagex is still an ongoing concern, mostly from RuneScape. Like they've tried to develop a whole lot of other games, but none of them have gone very well.
Kingdom of Loathing. There's a more recent game that's in that style called West of Loathing.
What is it?
It's called West of Loathing. It was really big in the YouTube circuits.
Yeah. I mean that's probably It's basically supposed to be very lighthearted. It was poking a lot of fun at MMO conventions. Like the currency was meat.
Yeah.
And so it's supposed to be kind of like a little bit of a lighthearted thing.
So the thing that kind of caught my attention was the story around Infinity Castle, where the owners of the company that owned the program got merged, and then Disney bought the merged company, but they didn't buy Castle Infinity with it. So the game got thrown around by a bunch of companies until it eventually got shut down. And the server for it, according to the story, now the story isn't verified, but the legend of the story is that the server that ran the game got thrown out in the trash, and a super dedicated player went to the studio and dug through the trash and got the server so that he could run it himself out of his own.
I find that a little hard to believe.
Yeah, but I know. Like I can't believe it, but like it's such a fascinating story that somebody
right
could have done this.
I could believe that maybe they went maybe they went and offered money for it to basically dispose of it, and then kind of knowing what they wanted to do, but I kind of find it hard to believe that somebody would just throw a server out in the trash because you can at least depending on why the business is closing down, you can at least get a little bit of money out of it.
Right. I just thought the story was funny.
Right. But like I said, I think one of the major issues. Are we gonna run anything?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. Do you want to do more?
Do we want to run some Hydron or Fissures?
I'm good with Fissures. I'm out of things to form on.
Whatever's fine.
Moment.
Okay, let me swap to my actual gear instead of my. So one of the problems you run into is that it's really hard to develop for kids because you have to kind of make this like really super friendly, sanitized type of world. You don't want to be the the developer that's known for like, oh, they're the ones that let the had the pedophile feeding grounds.
Wasn't that the problem with Lego? The Lego MMO. One of the problems was that they had massive amounts of moderation, which had to be done by people.
Right.
And that was like a huge cost in it.
Right. I mean, I mean, pretty much. That's the thing. Like Toontown had. I have a hilarious story. about Toontown's chat system.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a friend that consulted with Disney as they were making Toontown, and so they wanted, of course, to make sure that people weren't using bad words and weren't like doing obscene things. So they had a system where your chat would basically be you putting together different words and phrases. But my friend, basically consulting for them, basically went and showed them that like it basically it's all about context and innuendo. He constructed a sentence along the lines of, "I want to put my long necked giraffe in your fluffy bunny." And like you can't really stop that thing, like and I think that's the like I don't remember specifically about the Lego MMO if they need a bunch of moderation. I could believe that. Again, like Lego's another one of those big brands that wants to be kid and family friendly, and they don't want their name associated with being bad.
Well,
But
I think that's the one of the developers, I think at a GDC somewhere, I think did a talk about which amounted to the amount of moderation they had to do.
I found a tweet here by somebody, Megan Fox, who I think is supposed to be a developer for the Lego MMO. They set out a tweet saying, "Funny story, we were asked to make a dong detection software for the Lego universe too.
Oh.
We found it to be utterly impossible at any scale."
Right. Because you don't want kids making building penises out of Lego blocks and then showing screenshots on YouTube. Right. And so like this is the problem, is that like you have to keep things so squeaky clean for kids that you're just basically diverting resources, whether it's manpower through moderation or manpower through programming, into just like stopping bad actors. I mean, we can't even do that on like normal games where this isn't like griefing and swearing and
hot Galka sausage.
Oh.
I mean, it's impossible in normal MMOs, let kids MMO. So and I think that's I think a lot that's what probably killed a lot of them, is just that they couldn't maintain what is expected to be a kid friendly environment.
Right, a safe environment for.
Right.
Yeah, which is sad. Like, and I remember playing. I was playing one. What were you trying to link to, Jara? You can DM it to me and I'll verify it. I don't know why you can't put links. I'm
Because you're a bad person.
still trying to figure out what's going on with that. There's an interception up, so.
Yeah.
I'll just bring Nova. Make it easy. And I was playing Star Wars Galaxies at the time. And I remember what was the SOE FanFest called? I forget. It was SOE something, Sony something.
SOE Live.
Yeah. And we were listening to SOE Live through the in-game voice system. And they were talking about free realms. And I just remember all my friends, because we ran a family-friendly guild there. And I remember my friends in the guild, they're just like, oh god, that's gonna be horrible, because that's gonna be like a pedophile heaven,
Right.
Me being the optimist that I am, I'm like, oh, I'm sure they'll put in systems in place to protect people and this, that, and the other. And I'm looking back, I'm like, no, they were right.
Oh, you silly optimist, you.
Right. I hope I'm Slova. It's gonna be really awkward if I'm Tesla.
I think, yeah. Well, I mean, I think like if it were reasonable to do so, I think like like no developers like ha 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 we shall expose the kids to these miscreants. Um, but it's just the reality of the situation. Like you can't you can't there's so many things and yeah.
I think those are actually linked to the story you're referring to with Towns.
Oh.
I guess there's an actual story posted about it.
There you go. If it's Randy Farmer, then yeah, I'm friends with Randy, so.
Yeah, I'll post it in the chat. Yep, I gotcha.
But yeah, it's just one of those things that, how do you balance all these expectations and make a good game out of it? Like,
right, it's so hard. And like Toontown was a surprisingly fun game to play.
Right.
I think personally, I think Toontown would have worked out better if it was free to play because it was a $10 subscription.
Right.
It. And I never subbed to it. I mean it's free to play now because it's on a private server, but
right. Not quite the same thing.
Right. And actually Castle Infinity is still running as well now. It went through a few private hand exchanges.
Right.
And it's actually a running game now, although it hasn't been updated since 2014. But apparently for a while it was actually getting regular updates.
Yeah.
Which I find kind of interesting. And that's the other thing, like, not just kids games, but this is a tangent. It's a tangent. Talking about games that go under and then become private projects. Like Star Wars Galaxies, for example. There's several private projects of Star Wars Galaxies of just people trying to keep the game alive.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the nature of software, is that people like something and then they try to kind of preserve it. Especially games, like, and like those things are kind of a mixed bag, in my opinion, because like, because when I ran Meridian 59, 3DO was kind of foolish and they left some of the code that was intended for a German licensee, an unprotected FTP port. And so somebody got that, and then when 3DO shut it down, they released some of the not the source code, but the compiled binaries, and so people could pretty easily run private servers, especially as computers got more and more powerful, and what used to be like this hefty server machine is now I can run this on my smartphone.
Right.
You probably literally could actually run the Meridian server on your smartphone these days.
That's fascinating.
It was a really lightweight thing, so yeah, just get a DOS box emulator, and although I did use when it did require Windows. So anyway, complete tangent, but yeah, and so like but people would basically run these private servers, even though we were trying to I was trying to kind of make a business out of running the actual game,
right?
And a lot of people kind of like make excuses for it, and we're like, oh,
oh, got a gold.
Yeah, go for the gold.
Nice.
Yeah, and so it was a bit of frustration because I wanted to like people would kind of like just get their be upset for whatever reason,
and you were stuck there fighting against competition against your own game.
Right. But by someone who basically had, had just downloaded something and, was able to run it for free. They didn't have to pay employees. They were taking donations basically.
Mm.
Which basically meant, I will cheat for you for donations. Give me money, I will cheat for you.
Right.
That's what most donations mean. Yeah, and it was very frustrating. Like, 'cause on one hand, I kind of really do. I wish we had more better ways of kind of preserving a lot of older games. Because there's some games like like the original Neverwhere Nights on AOL that I'd be kind of interested in playing. But the flip side of that, of course, is that these games are also kind of a product of their times, of their community of their time as well. And I'm never going to be able to kind of play
They're not
the
very
original
good
AOL
experience.
Neverwhere Nights.
Yeah.
With the same people that were on AOL back in the, early 90s, basically. Late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, it's really tough. Yeah,
And so, yeah.
You kind of get that experience if you have like a game that you're super nostalgic for, and you go back to you leave it because of whatever issues. I mean, a lot of people will experience this with World of Warcraft, for example. You go back having this nostalgic itch, and then you experience the game again, and it's not the same as you remember it, because the game changes, the communities changes, the developers change.
Right. I guess this kind of ties back to the classic server that we were talking about one of the previous podcasts. That part of what makes a game special is like the people you play it with and the people that are playing it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have that, then it's going to feel different. So they can open up a classic World of Warcraft server all they want, but like for me, it's not going to be the same if my friends aren't playing it. And my friends, and like one of my friends was one of the more hardcore players, has 2 kids now. Like he can't do it like all night level thons or raiding and whatnot.
Right, exactly. Like time changes and people change with it.
Right. And so I think this is especially true for like online games as well, where you're never going to be able to even if you get past the graphics, even if you get past the content, even get past the lack of quality of life things that maybe you're used to in the modern games, you're not going to have those friends that or even just the general community that played the game before.
Yeah, I actually have that issue with PlanetSide 2, because I love playing PlanetSide 2. It is my most /risting game I own. And I play it when I'm feeling very emo and depressed, and it makes me feel something else. It makes me feel complete rage instead of depression.
Is this because the game's that bad?
Sure. It's because he's kind of bad, so.
Well, and so like my issue with PlanetSide 2 is that they're not pulling in new players to the game anymore. It's very much fallen down into its core player base now, which if you're not part of that core player base that's playing that game every day or every week, and like honing your shooting skills, or memorizing the meta strategies for every base encounter, you're going to be at a complete disadvantage. And there's no fodder for you to fight to make yourself feel better, because everyone that's playing is a veteran basically.
Right.
So then you're just dealing with people who know the game better than you, that play the game more than you. So you're just kind of just dying nonstop.
Right.
And I feel like that's the kind of experience you get when you go back to these older games that aren't pulling in new players anymore. Going in as a new player, you are inherently at a disadvantage.
Right. Especially for a smaller game where you have... Because Meridian suffered from that, definitely, when I was... Because it was very much a smaller game, had its own... It had its hardcore group already. That's a whole lot of garbage.
I blame you.
Look, we're all guilty. We're all picking the randos item. But yeah, and so it's. See, we suck so bad he doesn't even want to stick with us.
I know. He's the worst, though. He is the one that is the bad.
We can all be bad. Yeah, until I think, especially when you're talking about a competitive game, like PlanetSide or World of War, Meridian 59, was a hardcore PvP game.
Mm-hmm.
Like that type of competitive behavior, going in and playing with all these experts is going to be super intimidating. And so like even if you did have a newbie hose that was if you did have a newbie hose of people that were kind of like being brought into the game again, it would be hard to keep them because they're basically just going to get sent through the meat grinder.
Right. And Jara says in regard to re-experiencing old material, is that it's same with you should never read Shakespeare because his writing was a product of his time and the community that it was written for doesn't exist anymore.
I think somewhat. I think when you have something that's kind of stood the test of time, like Shakespeare, though, like stuff that kind of it becomes timeless. Like is PlanetSide 2 timeless? Probably not. Like,
right.
I think I'll try to give that argument to my friend's teenage son and see if he actually is dumb enough to tell his English teacher that.
I mean, people have tried, I'm sure.
Yeah, right. But I get where Dejar is coming from, but that there are things to learn from. Oh, sarcasm equals /s. Gotcha. It was a sarcastic statement. Gotcha.
I'd still tell my friend's teenage son. I'm pretty sure he's credulous enough to do it.
Yeah.
I think I know who you're talking about. Even
get back to us next week. Next time on Dragon Ball Z.
Right. But I think it is kind of there's that there's interest in kind of maintaining old games, but have we built the number of games that are, we'll probably consider truly timeless are small. And I think that we probably will eventually kind of it's I think a better example is like sometimes things like movies and whatnot they've maintained popularity over the years.
It just occurred to me. So they'll time travel to the future and find out the only MMO that they considered worth preserving was Anarchy Online.
I don't know what Anarchy Online is.
And you are better for it.
Okay.
I was gonna say Project Entropia.
Well, there's that too. I mean, it just has to be something just bad, but no one actually really wanted to play.
I think Online had its fans.
Yeah, it did.
So what's the story about Anarchy Online?
It was just a very early MMO developed by
basically.
Funcom.
Early MMO, like probably at the time the only science fiction MMO.
Yeah, I think that was one of the big things. It was the only science fiction game.
That's pretty much it.
It was developed by Funcom, who did Secret World and more recently. And I mean, it was an okay game, but it was very much like, we'll say it was definitely rough around the edges.
Oh, Dejar was arguing EVE Online should be the preserved game of the future.
We were talking sarcasm.
How about
might take that seriously.
Just preserve a copy of like Excel 2000?
Right.
With his name changed to Anarchy Online.
With a bunch of VBA scripts, and you can get that experience, that authentic EVE Online experience.
Nice.
Every once in a while, it just crashes on you and tells you suck.
And then you log back in, you're dead.
Exactly. You've been potted. All the values restart to 0.
With the Dark Souls you died screen on login with as much sass in text as possible. Okay, well this was fun. So moving on, I think we talked about. I think we're completely off topic now.
That's fine.
So the other thing you and I were riffing on this week was we were talking about Easter eggs.
Oh yeah.
And
Screw you guys.
You suck.
wow.
I didn't think you guys would get stuck in it.
Well, I'm not even like looking at my screen. I'm sitting here pulling up all my other reference materials.
Yeah. Fine. We'll have our own interceptions, blackjack, and hookers.
And we're all out of blackjack. So we were talking about, kind of briefly talking about, like the history of Easter eggs, and I didn't really get around to researching it that much.
Wow.
But we were talking about the arguably first Easter egg.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Which you informed me was in the Atari game Adventure. Where it, I mean, this kind of ties into two topics we were talking about, but the Easter egg was the developer's name gets introduced through the Easter egg, right?
Right. I forget his initials or yeah.
I can look it up.
But yeah, so the interesting little story behind that though is that the Atari was very jealous and guarded their designer programmers. Basically hid them away as much as possible because they didn't want them to be poached. And so kind of as a little act of rebellion, this one programmer put an Easter egg into the game.
Yeah, I have
that basically put an Easter egg into the game that basically like identified as the designer of the game. But it was one of those things where like they it was like you said, it was a bit of a rebellious move because a lot of these designers, the programmer designers had like got no recognition for this work. And so it's kind of like flows into a discussion about credits and whatnot. But Easter eggs are interesting. Is like there's been a lot of kind of interesting Easter eggs kind of hidden in the games. Some of it's just kind of like a little bit of humor. Some of it's like gets people in trouble. Like I forget what game it was, but there was one game that included the original like little South Park clip. The little Christmas before they had a show. There's like, some developer included that on as an Easter egg in the assets and got that in them a little hot water. There's this other developer who developed Simcopter, I think it was, where on the developer's birthday, it will because he was gay. So on his birthday, the game will show like on a rooftop, it'll show a bunch of guys scantily clad kissing each other.
Yeah. I remember reading about that one. That was actually really funny.
Yeah. I mean, like, and so like you kind of have these things that kind of get hidden in games in order to kind of like make a statement or
give a memento. I remember reading about an Easter egg in Psychonauts.
You opened the relic.
where if you climb up a particular building in a particular level and swing your camera around to a particular angle, you actually see a picture of one of the developers' wives.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's just like just a picture. Like, here, you're in the game. You're immortalized.
Right. I
But
remember there was a more recently. What game was it? Where some guy asked a developer to put a proposal in the game.
oh, that's Spider-Man. Spider-Man.
Yeah,
PS4.
and by the time it came out, they weren't dating anymore.
Yeah.
Successfully decoded the message.
It got patched out eventually. And
Right.
it was a movie marquee
Yeah.
in the city.
And so yeah, like sometimes the Easter eggs kind of go
A little awry.
horribly wrong.
But so one of the things I kind of wanted to toy with, one of the ideas I wanted to toy with was what makes it an Easter egg? What qualifies it as an Easter egg?
Extraction is available, but there are more messages to be decoded.
What qualifies an Easter egg to be what it is?
Right.
As
Well,
opposed to a
usually it's like
feature.
it's some kind of like hidden content that like the expectation I think is that most people are not going to be able to pick my item. That most people aren't expected to be able to see.
Because I was
Malgrim, pick my item, so I get a.
I wanted Valkyr Prime blueprint.
No,
Wow.
you don't get one.
Good work today.
Wow. See the abuse I have to deal with. Because I was thinking about the Halo games. In particular, I believe it was Halo 2 had these Easter eggs called skulls. And when you found a skull, it would unlock a function in the game that supposedly wouldn't be a part of changing the gameplay, but some of them would. Like, you get one skull that made it so that when you headshot an enemy and kill them with a headshot, their head would explode into confetti, and you get a little sound bit going, "Yay!" I think it was called the party skull, and then I think there was another skull that would like give low gravity, and then there'd be another one that would give such and such, but you'd have to find them on specific maps on specific difficulties. So like at the time, because I loved Halo 2 when I was playing it, particularly for single player. I never really got into multiplayer in the Halo games. I know, big surprise.
Right.
But I loved them at the time because I'm like, oh, they're like challenges to get. But thinking about it, I'm like, is that really an Easter egg or is that just a hidden feature? Because it does impact gameplay to a degree. So does it qualify as an Easter egg at that point? But then again,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, because usually, like most of the Easter eggs I'm familiar with, stuff that don't really affect the game, like
right?
Maybe stuff that like gives you a secret sound menu so you can play sounds or music or something like that.
Yeah, and I was thinking about like the Sonic games because there's Easter eggs in those too, where you can enter like debug mode and stuff like that through the sound test. And I think that was the main point of the sound test in most games, wasn't it?
Usually, like sometimes it was just added as an extra thing, just to entertain people.
Mm-hmm. But I never knew that about the sound test until years and years later. I'm like, you can do that. So I need to use the restroom real fast. So
okay,
I
want to take a quick break then. I'm gonna do the time then.
Okay. We will all be back shortly, I guess. Oh,
yep.
Mitter, it's your show.
Go.
Okay, I'm returned. Sorry about that. Easter eggs are as hidden features concept predate. Yeah, I don't know where they predate video games. I was just talking about them in video games, like what qualifies to be an Easter egg versus like a hidden feature or the like. Because there's a lot of games that kind of blur. Like, what I'm trying to get at is that there's not a clear definition of what qualifies an Easter egg. Okay.
I mean, there's usually some ambiguousness to most definitions, but
Right.
I think it's one of those things you kind of like. You can recognize it when you see it.
I'm just trying to poke at it. Trying to expand your minds to Mars, because we all came from Mars, and they made the frogs gay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm back.
You sure?
No.
Oh, good.
Such excitement. Anyways, so the other topic that are we good to continue? Is everyone here? Everyone got their signals?
Yeah, I'm here. I think the last thing I'll say about Easter eggs is I think that they're it's kind of interesting how they kind of like they fell by the wayside as you got DLC.
Right.
Like a lot of stuff that used to be kind of DLC, or it used to be kind of Easter eggs, like you were commenting about the Halo, skulls and whatnot. Like those kind of fell by the wayside, and then suddenly became like DLC. Oh, for $2 you can have head explode party mode, and so it's kind of been interesting to see that change.
Actually, I have the perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
Breath of the Wild has the first DLC that came out for it was just a bundle of like vanity items.
Mm-hmm.
And like you can get like Majora's Mask, you can get like Tingle's outfit, you can a lot of ridiculous things, and some of them actually have functions.
Right.
So, other than that, I think we're pretty good on. Oh, and the second DLC. Let me get into that for a second. The entire DLC, which is basically going through hard mode versions of all the boss fights, get you a motorcycle.
Right.
Like, get you a motorcycle. I don't know how to feel about that. I use it when I play the game. Was it worth the 6 hours of grinding to get it? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it. It's awesome, but I'm just like, was that really like a fair payoff for everything I just went through to get it? I don't know. But it's DLC, so whatever. Anyways. So we're talking about credits. Let's talk about the politics of getting credited in games.
Oh my, yeah. Well, yeah. This guy, like I said, one of the earliest Easter eggs, it was basically like a developer wanting credit for their work. And we have, it's very interesting because, like, going back to talking about Hollywood, like we have in the past, like Hollywood has very specific rules about who gets credited and what titles mean and all this stuff. game development is a lot less, firm about that. And like even what like ask what a producer does in most game companies, and it's going to change. But it's going to be radically different in almost every company. At least that's been my experience. And so what happens? What happens is you have people, basically you have no kind of firm rules about who gets credit or not, and but this is one that get recognition for what you've done. Give me one moment. Sorry about that. It basically get recognition for what you've done, what work you've worked on, what games you worked on. But there's a lot of kind of things that are very common, very common behaviors that kind of really are kind of mildly sleazy, to be honest. One of the examples being that one of the examples being if you've worked on a project, even if you worked on the project for years, but then you don't stay till the end, either because you leave or you're fired or whatever, you will generally will not get credit. You will not be on the credits for that game.
Right. And that there's a controversy, I think it was a couple years ago now, talking about Rockstar with Grand Theft Auto 5. One of the creators of Grand Theft Auto was working on Grand Theft Auto 5, but I think he was forced out of the company, and he was not credited in the game. If I remember correctly. If I remember the story correctly.
Right.
And he actually sued Rockstar over it. I don't know where that legal battle went with it. I should have researched it before I brought it up.
Right.
Because this is a professional podcast.
Yes. Very organized.
But that just shows, it still can be a relevant argument, even in the modern industry.
Well, I mean, I've known people that got companies or left because of personal reasons or whatever. Not necessarily because they were a terrible person and had to be fired and let go. But people that contributed, especially in the early days of a game, where they might contribute some very fundamental design or code or art or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Even if that gets removed later, a lot of times stuff will be built on that. And so so then you get it's kind of a little sleazy to kind of to remove these people. I mean, it's mostly done to basically punish people, and kind of going back to kind of what we were talking about with crunch. If you don't like crunch, well, guess what? Yeah, you can leave, but you're not going to get credit for this work, and so you're not going to be on the official credits. And and given kind of the way modern references work, a company will be like, yes, they worked for this company. They don't have to. That's generally they will do the minimum that they are required to do in order to kind of avoid bad mouthing. But if but it's kind of that wink and nudge thing. Is if they don't admit you worked on the company, worked on a project, well, that might be something where a little hint that you pissed off somebody important or whatever.
Right. And that also brings up the topic of when developers don't want their names on a project.
Oh, right. I think I won't mention the name, but I did work on a game. Usually I'm credited as Brian Psychochild Green, and part of the reason I use the Psychochild name is to be a little more recognizable, because Brian Green's a very common name. There's one game I did not want to be credited as Brian Psychochild Green. I was just Brian Green on that. because I didn't. Yeah, it's not a game I'm particularly proud of. I was young and I needed the money.
Right. The jar just bring up an interesting point though. That when a developer has an issue, and well, here's a question to start off: is it common for game developers to have like their own personal blogs and whatnot? Is that a common thing for devs to do?
Yeah, I mean, like most developers have some kind of social media presence these days.
Twitter,
So.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, like
sorry, go ahead.
I mean, that can be a source of pride or frustration, depending.
Dejara suggested if devs are having issues or they get scorched off of a project, they can blog about it directly to whoever's listening to them.
Well, I mean, the other problem too, though, is that if that's perceived as throwing a temper tantrum, well, that's kind of a double score against you, where obviously the developer kind of like whoever isn't putting on the credits, and then on top of that, well, now you're just demonstrating that you're hard to work with.
Right.
And stuff like that basically goes a long way in the game industry, and unfortunately. So I mean and that's like unlikely to get you, because the reason you want your name in the credits is so when you go apply for your next job, you can say, oh no, I actually did work on big popular game, or even like even small game, like having credits to your name shows that you were able to kind of contribute to a team, at least in some capacity. But if you kind of like stomp your feet and throw a temper tantrum about it, that kind of works against you. It's an even bigger mark against you than not being on the credits potentially is.
Right. And that does kind of something that I think about a lot because I do the streaming stuff. People that are used to being in a public face, they get very desensitized to the fact that they're constantly speaking on a public forum. And they'll start, like Twitter, for example. People use Twitter as like a personal forum a lot of the time.
Right.
While seeming to...
Look at the name. It's no great loss.
I know. See ya. Yeah. I Hold up.
I just got linked this thing. Apparently, CD Projekt Red is hiring. One of my friends who's in programming just like want to go to Poland. And I was like, wait, what's going on? And I just looked at it. It's a hiring
No, nice
page.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry.
No, that's fine. Yeah. So. And yeah, like so Twitter, Twitter presence is like you said, kind of like people kind of get inured to the fact that they're speaking in public, and there's always kind of the issue about people talk about, like, even back in the early internet, people talk about representing your employer or whatnot. There's a thing that people call the standard disclaimer. I'm speaking for myself, not speaking for an entity.
Right.
And it kind of became a joke because it just kind of assumed that way. But like as internet communication became more and more popular, this kind of held a little bit less. because all of a sudden lawyers get involved instead of just people kind of pointing fingers at each other.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, that's relevant to what we talked about with Guild Wars, the Guild Wars stuff. With the developer who the developer and the partner streamer that the writer
had a clash.
Yeah. And she lost her job because of the stuff that she was saying on Twitter, and
right,
it turned into a business issue when technically I think she was speaking on like her personal Twitter account. I'm just like, well,
right. I mean, I mean, it was a kind of a bit of a messy issue because it was her personal Twitter account, but she was handling discussion from I believe a Reddit AMA.
Right.
And she kind of redirected discussion to that Twitter account. So,
are we missing a mob somewhere?
I don't know. Suddenly this I don't see any red indicators. Usually they give you a red. Yeah, and so basically, was is a person representing the company, in what capacity? When are they on their own private time? Can somebody's attitudes? If somebody has a
their
personal
employer tell the difference between real complaints or online brigading with from bad faith actors?
Right. Yeah, and so it's just my personal opinion is I think that you really need to keep in mind you are at least a little bit in the public spotlight. When I was running Meridian, I definitely was conscious of the fact that I was representing myself, if nothing else. The company I was running. And if I were going to express my opinion about somebody, a customer, like are we bugged or what?
No, I found it. I found it.
Why did you?
Yeah, I got it. It's like in the wall of one of the spawn rooms.
Oh. Nice. I ran out of power while we're doing that.
Oh, so Dejara actually has some more information about that whole Guild Wars thing that I didn't know about. Was the drawer the streamer? I'd have to look it up. Dejara brought up the name. I'm just not sure of the name. He's saying that I think the streamer was on a podcast on the prior weekend saying how much he liked her work.
Oh yeah.
Guild Wars 1 promoter to have an NPC with his name in Guild Wars 2.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, this is the thing too, is that this wasn't necessarily some random jackass that she was kind of snarking at. This was someone that was a big fan. Yeah, I remember talking about that. I saw a clip of that where the streamer was talking about how much he just respected her and appreciated her writing and her lore.
Right.
But I mean, it's kind of like any other company. If you're a McDonald's employee and you go around standing out front of the store, kind of complain about how about the negative attributes of McDonald's customers, you kind of expect McDonald's to get a little cranky at you.
Right. But I mean, like, the counter argument to that though is that McDonald's isn't a creative field.
Well, I mean, but you're still an employee. I mean, like, yeah, yes. There's you can be a creative field, but like, still, like, um, you can be an actor and then go and stand in front of a movie theater telling about how stupid people are they to go watch your movies.
I think that's something Shia LaBeouf actually did. Just
Well,
saying.
okay.
Actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf.
But I was gonna say he's a cannibal. No. This is the least of his sins. I mean, doing something like that isn't a publicity stunt, obviously.
Right.
If you insult, if you complain about your customers, even if it's potentially a legitimate complaint, companies and customers don't take too well to that.
I think that, well, I mean, my other counter argument about it though is that she opened the floodgates for the criticism.
Right. She was presenting herself as a representative. She's talking about her work on the game.
Right.
She had someone that was coming in, and like, her major complaint was like, oh, somebody coming in and tell me how to do the job. I'm like, yeah, like, this is the nature of online game development. Like, I had plenty of people to tell me how I should run my advertising campaign for Meridian 59, what I should develop, how I should program. This feature is so easy. Why am I such an idiot for not implementing it? Like,
Right.
Like this, none, like, hell, the thing I saw the guy post was, downright polite, and everybody's like, oh, it's, of course he's polite, but he's putting her down as a woman. It's like, no, like, he was, if, from my perspective, he was asking a question that, the type of question that I fielded a lot when I was running Meridian 59 about, like, stuff that felt very basic to me. But, like, I was out there in the open promoting my game, talking to players. I mean, my whole blog is basically kind of like is an extension of that, like, trying to explain development concepts to people who aren't developers.
Right. Yeah, I
get asked a lot of basic questions, and, like, if you're going to run an MMA, I mean, same thing. You're kind of like saying, ask me anything. I mean, like,
right.
Literally what it means, like, so if somebody comes along and asks you something, like some basic one-on-one questions, well, yeah, sorry, that person's not a developer, like.
And that's kind of an extent, like the stream is kind of an extension of that philosophy, because I don't know basic development stuff, and I want to learn, and I like to share my learning with other people, so. Because I can ask the questions that, might be beneath you to even think about. Because I'm a normie.
No.
What?
Not even close.
No, I'm the non-developer normie. I don't know the.
Yeah, but no, you can't claim to be normal.
Okay. Wow, that burned.
Oh, come on. None of us here are normal.
Oh my god.
We're not going to go.
Apparently.
I guess.
I need to go and take care of my dog, so
Okay.
I can
Okay.
AFK for a while.
Thanks for hanging out with us. I'm sitting here reading these name suggestions for the podcast. The Mulgrim Adventures of Psy in Game Development.
Guys.
Oh my goodness. I love them. Don't stop with the name suggestions. I'm absolutely loving this.
Keep on entertaining us.
Yeah, exactly. Like that made my morning when I just saw a list of just these out of nowhere names. I loved it. Okay. Guess we'll just drop and reform and.
Sure.
So, let's see here. What else do we have to talk about? I lost my list. Oh, so another thing that I did this week, or was it last week? I think it was this week. I don't know what time. What is time? Time is a construct that. I'm sorry. I'm not here anymore. I've checked out. So
Wow.
I was watching a history of Tetris.
Mm-hmm.
A documentary of the history of Tetris, which I thought was really interesting, and it brought up some interesting things that I thought we could talk about. Which was we've talked about licensing before, I think,
Mm-hmm.
like the woes and the complications of getting game licenses and how they complicate everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the story of licensing Tetris was actually really interesting. Let's find a game real fast. Another Neo Defense.
Sure.
And so Tetris in itself was, and this will tie into the other subtopics. Tetris itself was developed by an employee of the Russian government on a governmental computer
Right.
on his off hours, because those were the only computers that anyone had access to in Russia at the time, because it was during the Soviet Union. And he was an IT. I think he was actually an AI developer, but he and his colleagues would stay at work after hours and develop video games off the clock, because that was the only time they had access to computers to develop things.
Right. Right.
And so he enjoyed this puzzle game where you take block pieces and you try to make a rectangle out of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like one of his favorite games to play with as a child. I don't even want to say his name. Like, I can't.
Right. Anyway.
I can't say it off the top of my head. Pelinko. Anyways, Pavinov. That's it. I had to look at. I had to see how it was spelled. Pavinov. Paginov, sorry. Anyways, so he developed a likeness of this childhood game, and it would have the blocks drop down, and then it would clear when he got a full row, and we all know how Tetris works. And he showed it to his supervisors, and they were really, really impressed by it. So they started passing out copies of this game to contacts and other people in other countries that might be interested in the software. And it got to Hungary, which was the Western world's gateway to
Right.
the East.
Right.
And so that got passed around, and the contact in Hungary got a license agreement to sell Tetris on IBM personal computers only, like that.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing was signed. It was a verbal agreement.
Right.
And so he sub-licenses to two other companies. I know I'm doing it bad by not putting out names, because whatever. I'm just giving the brief here.
Right.
So he works with two companies to license out to IBM computers, but in the agreement that he had faxed or telefaxed, it also had the wording "in other computers," and he interpreted that as consoles. When the Russians did not interpret that, did not mean it that way. They meant other computers.
Right,
and
right.
it would get fixed later when he got called out on it. And so the game starts getting developed for PCs and consoles. But then those two companies start sub-licensing out to other companies because they can, whatever.
Like, yeah, when Tetris was kind of like first had, first came out, it was like, just like this super popular, crazy cool game.
Yeah, and it was just all over the place.
Right.
And eventually it gets to the point where rumors start spreading around that nobody actually has the license. Like, no contract has been signed. And one of the sub-licensees of the sub-licensees goes straight to Russia to be like, I need the license for Nintendo.
Right.
Because Tenjin was pushing out their version of it.
Right.
And Nintendo's just like, we can't have that. And so he goes to Russia, starts talking to the Russian company that was in charge of the international licenses, and they go, who are you?
Right.
Like, they didn't even know, Russia didn't even know who was in this license agreement anymore.
Right.
Because of the Iron Wall. And
Action is ready.
so Russia ended up giving license rights to this set of companies, while all these other companies thought that they had the license rights to consoles. And it just turned into this huge just debacle of miscommunication.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought it was interesting because that can never happen now.
I mean, it could happen, but it's a lot less likely to happen, yeah. Because you generally have, people, the contracts get signed a lot more, and information travels faster, and
Right.
Another opportunity.
but yeah. Well, I mean, the interesting thing about like IP license rights is they are, essentially what's called infinitely divisible. As long as depending on how the contract is worded, depends on what people can actually develop. I think the most interesting thing, like a perfect example of this, is Lord of the Rings versus Middle Earth, two completely separate licenses.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might have someone who's talking about games, you might have a game company. One company that has a license for Middle Earth on consoles, and you have another one that's has a license for Lord of the Rings on consoles.
Right.
Or there's a Middle Earth online versus a Lord of the Rings online. And then you can kind of divide the rights up more. Like, oh, you can do Lord of the Rings on these consoles, and this other company can do Lord of the Rings on consoles, or time period, or you can do basically you have it for these 2 years, and then after that's expired, then we sign a license with this other person, or it could be based on territories, it could be based on a whole lot of things, and so you could have someone who has a license that basically, where somebody else has a very similar license, but just like slightly different based on what contract was signed.
Yeah, that's actually it was a joke when I was looking at it, but talking about the Shadow Mortar games, you have two trademarks in a single game title. You have Middle Earth trademarked, Shadow of War trademarked.
Right.
And like everyone made fun of it when that was a thing, when they noticed it.
Right.
But I mean, that makes sense if it's two different trademarks being
right. You have the Middle
expressed.
Earth trademark, which is controlled by the Tolkien estate. And then you have then the Shadows of War, which may be owned by them, or maybe owned by
Or
Tolkien estate, or maybe owned by
Warner
EA. Or
Brothers. Because I think that was Warner Brothers games, wasn't it?
yeah, I don't remember.
I'll find out.
Pretty sure it was EA.
Developers, Monolith Productions, Feral Interaction. I don't see a publisher here though.
Anyway, not all that important. But anyway,
No,
yes.
it's not. No, I think EA did the second game.
Anyway, with the point being that you can have very fine slices of licensing rights.
Oh, Warner Brothers was the publisher. I was right.
Okay. Anyway.
Right.
Yeah. So again, the point being that you can kind of slice up the licensing rights in many different ways, and so and that's why that whole thing with the Tetris discussion, why it was important, why the and other computers was important,
Right.
because they wanted to be able to go and the original owners wanted to be able to go and license it as much as possible, and
Right.
they negotiated a price based on what they thought was going to be sufficient for it. So if they're kind of giving away the console rights for too cheap, then whoops.
And they ended up correcting that wording and saying, and by defining a computer as something that has a monitor, mouse, and keyboard, and processor, and blah 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 blah.
Right.
But because they didn't intend consoles, but because of the wording and translations,
Right.
the interpretation was that a console was considered other types of computer.
Right.
And it was just really interesting to watch that documentary, because it showed very much the Russian government being very capitalistic.
Right.
When that was supposed to be like what they were, like philosophically against, according to history.
Right.
But like they're very much playing everybody to get as much money as they can off of this super popular product. So yeah, I'm not the one getting down this time.
This time.
Well, I brought Garuda, so.
Just wait. You'll use Bloodletting too many times.
I have a Kavat with me now. The Kavat heals me. Anyways.
But you want low health in order to do more damage.
I know, I probably shouldn't have the Kavat with me, whatever. So like, I just thought that licensing story was kind of interesting. It's just how licensing works in general. I find somewhat kind of fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, sometimes they turn into really interesting stories of this person getting ripped off for this license, or it gets kind of backstabby at times.
Let's go. Right. Well, I mean, yeah, people want the most popular license at the best price, so.
Right.
Sometimes that means they kind of have to go a little rough, so.
So going into that, we could talk about Tengen, the publisher of the true Tetris. Right.
Yeah. Well, True Tetris for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Yeah, it was one of those things where you kind of go into IP rights because Nintendo is very big into controlling who is able to publish games on the Nintendo Entertainment System, and later on the Super Nintendo and whatnot. where they had patents that protected the how the cartridges were made and formed.
And in order to be a licensee, you had to have their SDK kit.
Well, you basically had to have to actually create the cartridges.
Right.
Actually, I think specifically, usually Nintendo was a basic, they offered cartridge creation. But the long and short of it is like, they had a lot of tight control over who was able to publish a game on their system.
And they still do, to some degree.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's modern consoles. Like, the modern consoles work by very strictly controlling who is allowed to publish on the console.
Going back to Bob's game.
Well, and then the console developer basically makes license fees from each cartridge sold. And that's basically how why the big that's why we don't have Atari consoles quite the lockdown that a lot of the other companies did.
Sorry, you cut out on that one.
That's why we don't have Atari consoles anymore, because the we have they didn't have quite as much control over what was published on the Atari, especially the Atari VCS 2600, compared to how much control that Nintendo is able to exert.
And so, come in with Tenjin, who ended up making unlicensed Nintendo product.
Well, yeah, they basically reverse engineered the patent, and were able to circumvent the patent, and make their own cartridges, basically. Yeah, so like Nintendo kind of like put it position as the Nintendo seal of approval or seal of quality, and that was essentially that was part of the licensing agreement, that you could put that on your game if you license the cartridge tech.
Yeah, and merch now.
Right. But yeah, and so so Tenjin came along and basically was able to get to basically make cartridges without violating patents, I believe. I want to say that there probably was a lawsuit, but I don't remember. Yeah.
Tenjin Company.
Tenjin Nintendo lawsuits. And so, they also produced a version of the Gauntlet. But yeah, I didn't have the little Nintendo seal of quality on it.
Eventually, apparently, they did agree to their license agreement with Nintendo. Apparently, in 1987. In '88, they released their first 3 cartridges, licensed through Nintendo: RBI Baseball, Pac-Man, and Gauntlet. Meanwhile, they were secretly working to bypass the lockout chip. Okay. So they were doing both.
Right, gotcha.
They chose to reverse engineer. However, the engineers were... Wait. They chose to reverse engineer the chip and decipher the code required to unlock it. However, the engineers were unable to do so, and the launch date for its first batch of games was rapidly approaching. They turned to the Copyright Office. While time was running short, Tenjin turned to the Copyright Office, the United States Copyright Office. Its lawyers contacted the government office to request a copy of the Nintendo Lockout program, claiming that the company needed it for potential litigation against Nintendo. Once obtained, it used the program to create its own chip that would unlock the NES. When Tenjin launched the unlicensed versions of its games, Nintendo immediately sued Tenjin for copyright and patent infringement. This began a series of lawsuits between the companies, which would not be settled until 1994. Oh. Like, that's actually really interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't know about that copyright office. That's That's interesting. Yeah, no, that's definitely bad behavior on their part, though.
Yeah. Let's see here. Tengen faced another court challenge with Nintendo in 1989 in copyright controversy over Tetris. Tengen lost this suit as well and was forced to recall what was estimated to be hundreds of thousands of unsold cartridges, having only sold about 50,000. Tengen went on to produce games for Sega Genesis, Master System, Game Gear, Sega CD, Atari Lynx, I don't even know that one. TurboGrafx 16.
Yeah.
Company also licensed games for home computers such as the Amiga and Atari ST, most of which were published by British company Dormac. It is best known for its supports of popular Atari arcade games such as Clax, Hard Driven, Stun Runner, and Paperboy, although they published many other titles as well. In 1994, Time Warner bought a controlling stake in Atari Games, Tengen, Atari Games. Okay, why does it say Atari Games? Okay, and Time Warner Interactive Group were all consolidated into Time Warner Interactive.
Right.
Okay. Let's hear. Manufactured both licensed and unlicensed versions of 3 other NES games. Their cartridges for unlicensed games do not come in universally recognizable gray shape. Instead, they're rounded, black, matte black, and resemble original Atari cartridges.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Like I said, I knew a little bit about that. I knew they were kind of like they were unlicensed. Yeah, because I had Gauntlet on my NES.
I've never played the original Gauntlet. I played... Okay, maybe you can help me with this, because there's a Gauntlet that came out for one of the later Nintendo systems, either 64 or GameCube. I can't remember which one, but I cannot remember the name
I
of
think
it.
in 64 there's Gauntlet Dark something. Dark Legacy, maybe?
Okay. Because, like, it's like the
original Gauntlet was an arcade game,
right?
And it was a particularly devious arcade game because it was kind of an action RPG type game, and you had health that basically kept on counting down. You could eat food to increase your health. If you took damage from monsters, obviously you lost a bunch of health. But you could basically keep on feeding quarters into it in order to keep on getting health.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is like one of the earliest games that basically like the more you pay, the more it was like literally pay to win.
Right.
You could basically just keep on throwing quarters in there and keep on playing longer and longer.
Elf shot the food.
Right.
Yeah, I've watched people play the original Gauntlet and Gauntlet 2.
Right.
I swear the game that I remember playing was called Gauntlet Run, but like I'm obviously wrong because I've never been able to find it.
No, they did kind of like the original Gauntlet was like 2D top-down sprites.
Right.
They did make some 3D Gauntlet games. There was an arcade version of it, and then like a lot of the console, that console generation included like the N64.
Yeah, the one that I played was a 3D one, and I loved it. I just can't remember what it was. Although there is a Gauntlet on Steam called Gauntlet Slayers, I think.
Yeah, I might have that one.
I think you do. I think that's why it popped up on my Steam list. I'm like, maybe if I got that, we could play it together.
Yeah, I mean it's a multiplayer game. It's a 3D type game, but it's a little bit more like the more modern ones. Although I think they try to do a little bit of the aesthetic of the older games.
Right.
But like there's a lot of like jumping around. Using 3D environment.
Do we have another bugged mob? It's been a while since we... Oh, I found it. It's up in the same room again.
Really?
Yeah, I got it. Thankfully, Garuda's number 4 can go through walls.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So if I know which direction to face. Yeah. Actually, how much is it? I might pick it up for Christmas. Maybe we can play it then.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a fun game. Actually, I think I got it for last Christmas. Like it was on sale, and I think maybe a friend gifted it to me. I don't remember. I played a whole lot. I played a little bit
stream,
of it.
wink, wink. No.
Right. I played a little bit and I liked it, but I think I was holding off and seeing if that friend would play with me.
Mm. Yeah, a future stream game. Look forward to it.
There we go. But yeah, so like IP and license is really interesting for games too. Because kind of a related thing we were talking about is like movie games.
Oh yeah.
And how they were kind of like they've been, like in the past they're kind of universally terrible, and one of the main reasons for that is that one of the main reasons for that was that often a game company would get the license for it and have to develop a game very quickly,
Mm-hmm.
either in order to coincide with the game's or movie's release, or to meet a holiday, the holiday season,
Right.
almighty holiday season. And so you had a lot of games that kind of like
Reinforcements available. Do you choose to leave now or continue fighting?
basically like you had so the company would get a license, they would have to rush the game really badly. So a lot of times they would, oh my god.
Should we mention E.T.?
Oh my. Actually, I kind of like that. I like that kid as a game. I like that game as a.
You are a masochist.
I mean, yeah, let's extract.
Okay.
Since somebody didn't want to hang around and bolted on us. You're kind of getting toward 11 though, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
we did get a late start.
The ET was definitely a game that we kind of fell into that. They had a very limited amount of time. They were kind of trying to rush to get it done for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And like they wanted to kind of capitalize on the enthusiasm for it. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things that people the audience did not react in the way that the company expected to. They were much more resistant to opening their wallets than they thought they would be.
Dejaro says E.T. the extra terrible. But yeah, like I played the first Transformers game to the Michael Bay's Transformers movies.
Oh yeah.
Horrible.
Oh yeah, I remember you talking about that. Yeah.
Absolutely horrible.
Yeah. A lot of times, like especially like during the NES era, like what companies would do, they'd basically kind of take another type of a game that's very similar, and then basically just kind of slap graphics on it, which always kind of ended up being a little weird, where you'd have like a game that was like a platformer when they the thing was like a science fiction shooter, like
a good game that kind of merges this with the last game topic. Superman 64.
Oh. Oh my.
Terrible game, and a lot of the reason game developers have gone on record saying that a lot of the reason why it was terrible was because the license holder Warner Brothers or DC, I'm sorry, DC kept interfering with development, saying, oh well, Superman can't he can't kill people, and there shouldn't be fighting, and there shouldn't be this, that, and the final boss has to be a tornado. Oh wait. That was the later the Superman Returns game was that. Like all this crazy stuff, and like the developer said that DC was basically just trying to sabotage them. Because they weren't able to bring the game up to the expectations that DC had for it. So they're just like, oh, we'll just sabotage it, which I don't think sounds quite right. It sounds like the devs started trying to kind of push blame a little bit in that regard, because I don't think a licensor would try to sabotage a project.
Yeah, I mean, you could. Like, I ran into a very similar situation myself, where I was working for a company, and working on a project that was based on a IP they held, and then they sold the IP, and then the new license holder had absolutely no motivation to help us, develop the game of the game we were working on with that IP that just got sold.
Oh, okay.
And so basically there was a lot of there was a lot of that. It was an MMO type game, and so the company we were working for, the publisher that published the game, and they sold it to I want to say Ubisoft, but I forget. But yeah, like it was but then the new license holder kind of came back to us and started putting like all these very onerous restrictions on it, saying you need to it has to be a subscription based game, when we were trying to make a free to play game, just stuff like that like really it was odd that they would put these restrictions on it, except for the fact that they are maybe they were trying to scuttle the project.
Right. That's weird. Rule of thumb: if possible, use your own IP. Well, that's always that's a whole other conversation.
Right.
Talking about IP usage. We can put that on hold for next week, since I think we're kind of wrapping up for now.
Yeah.
Let me find my list here.
It kind of has a little thing, rule of thumb: when possible, use your own IP. Problem, IP licensing is really interesting. That's probably another a topic we can kind of bring up at another time. But yeah, I mean, there's a reason why IP licensing is popular, but it's fraught with peril.
Let me write that one down so I don't forget it real fast.
Yeah.
Because
that is a good
that
topic for us to talk about the pros and cons of developing, licensing IP versus developing your own.
Yeah, that's a whole topic. Oh no, what have I done?
Yeah, it's a whole big crazy topic.
Versus IP licensing versus
developing your own.
Developing. Yeah, I mean, we could do that next week, since we've been kind of scrounging for topics.
Yeah. Well, we're working on it. We got a big old list of topics, so definitely kind of like if you enjoy the podcast, go visit the Discord server that Malgrim has set up. We have a whole channel talking about topics. So if you want to hear us blather on about something in particular.
Wow, Catlingerbot is on point. And I always upload raw footage episodes and archive them on YouTube. If you want to check that out, the link's in the chat. I'm also working on doing edited versions of episodes as well. I'm working on it. Okay. WIP.
Work in progress.
And if you're here not from Sai's blog, check out his blog, because a lot of stuff that we talk about started there. And he'll do occasional wrap-ups, too, on some of the stuff that we talk about as well. And follow me on Twitter, because everything that I do gets notified on Twitter now. So if you don't want to miss anything, or know when I go live, or know when I upload something, follow me on Twitter, because that YouTube and Twitch, it's all there. So thanks for watching us tonight, though. It's been a really good stream.
Yeah. It was a good one to get a little bit of interaction with people and especially kind of like a little bit of potpourri. It's always kind of fun to go off on wild tangents too. So
Yeah, it's hell to edit, but that's fine.
I don't have to edit. I don't care.
You just hear about me complain about it later.
Oh god. Be right back. Meeting Mulgrim.
Okay, so I'm gonna raid someone. I'm gonna raid Surian like usual. So go out with him, give him some love. I think we're pretty much done now.
Yep. I think we're good.
Thanks for watching. Hang out with Surian, give him some love, and we'll see. I might be doing some streaming tomorrow while I level up a character on 14. If you guys want to hang out with that, please. It'll be sometime around 6 p.m. Eastern or so, probably. So I'll see you guys there. And of course, we'll do this again next week.
Yep.
So see you.
Right.